let me ask the question, what concerns you as an individual, as a pastor, layman? What concerns you about the future church? That's a question. Looking for an answer. Yes, sir. What the preaching is going to look like. Yes, sir. Because we're in a state where people won't feel better sermons than do better sermons. And what I challenge our associates is to make sure that you got the tools you need to rightly divide the word of God. Study to show thyself approved. Workmen need not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of God. And that word, rightly divide, means to cut straight. So thank you, Dr. Brooks. What will the preaching look like? Wow. What a great question. What a great question. And that's a challenge that we're going to have to be able to look at in the days to come, because a lot of churches we see now have virtual congregations where people can join and be a part of that congregation as a virtual member. We see that. I don't know if y'all saw something most recently. It's taking place right here in our city. So again, that's a great concern. Someone else? Yes. Did y'all hear what Dr. Gordon says? As a Baptist church, what will our doctrine look like? And I contend it's very important that during our new member orientation that you have a section that talks about what we believe. I believe that. What makes us different. I was just talking about this morning with a pastor who's been pastoring another church in a different denomination, and he's the same age I am, and he's been pastoring there 20 years, but the church looks different. But that was a concern. Someone else? Anyone else? And the question for those who are coming in is, what are your concerns about the future church? Anyone? Yes. Right. Right, that's something. Mm-hmm. And it goes back to what I said is if we observe, assess, examine what we call church, how we're doing church, what we're allowing to take place in church, then we ought to consider the future church. Reverend Winston. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. That's right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes a difference. The author suggests there are three things that we might want to consider as we think about the future church. The first thing that he suggests is patterns are hard to change. And maybe not so much pattern, but people. Maybe it's not so much patterns, it's people are hard to change. And I put in there, what are the 7 last words of the church? We've always done it this way. not saying that that's all wrong, but it may say that we can re-examine, look at it from a different perspective, maybe fine-tune it, but it's not saying that we shouldn't make any changes. But I also suggest that change should be taught. Oftentimes, I think one of the biggest tragedies or the biggest problems that new pastors make is they don't teach change. So then they end up with a lot of resistance. The second thing he says, change builds, but then surprises us. Talk to me, somebody. What do you feel Mancini is saying? What's your commentary on what he said? Change builds, but it surprises us. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Very much so. Someone else. What you thinking? As one of my professors, Dr. Godman, would come in class, what you thinking? All right. Did y'all hear what Dr. Lewis says? Sometimes people get excited about the change, but when the change happens, it becomes too much. Mm-hmm. Someone else. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. That's right. Ask. Yes. Ain't that something? Ain't that something? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Ain't that something? Mm-hmm. Ain't that something? Ain't that something? That's right. That's right. And see, and that's the difference, because the leader has, or the pastor has sight, has vision, and you have sight. See a little further. It's amazing that Mancini says that churches go through a 20-year cycle. It didn't really stick until I thought about something. That I'm in my 10th year as pastor of Mount Zion, but 10 years ago, I came in after a 20-year cycle. One pastor had pastored about 12 and a half, almost 13 years, and the one prior to me, 7. And I shared with them that change is going to happen. We'll be okay. You'll be okay, but you got to be able to embrace it. And of course, you know, some liked, some didn't, but God is blessed. And I hope I can get to that point later. Finally, leaders, because this chapter is really directed towards leaders, but everyone is inclusive here tonight, is that leaders play a major role in change. Major role. And it goes on to talk about how he tells the story about Presbyterian pastor and a young Baptist pastor, and both of them said pretty much the same thing, two different ways. The short is said that they argued one thing about churches these days, that some churches are over-programmed and under-discipled. Over-programmed and under-discipled. He says that the functional Great Commission has changed. We all know, most of us should know what our Great Commission is, right? Matthew 28:18-20, go ye therefore. It's really as you are going. Make disciples. That's what teaching really is in the Greek form. Make disciples. We are to make